Gurmaga Cairn Corlin, I'd like to begin by wishing the Minister all the best in his new brief and congratulating him on his appointment to the role, filling in from excellent work that has been done by his constituency colleague Helen McEntee previously. The Minister and I have discussed matters as they pertain to Europe and indeed Brexit many times over the most recent years, be it in the media and various other fora. And as he well knows and he has seen, in recent months Ireland holds a great deal of influence around the world, but particularly in the European Union. Over recent years, we have seen two Irish people hold the vitally important role of Secretary-General of the European Commission. We see Emily O'Reilly fill the role of EU Ombudsman and Emer Cook as the head of the European Medicines Agency. However, all is not well, and these achievements do not hide the fact that officials expect that over the coming years there will be a significant reduction in Irish officials working in the EU institutions, as many high-ranking officials are nearing retirement age. The great surge of talented Irish people taking up roles in the European institutions in the 1970s and the 1980s has not been consistently replenished. Much like our colleagues in Denmark, we are well below the replacement level, and this will reduce Ireland's influence. Ireland's diplomatic presence around the world is incredibly strong, and we must not allow this to fall by the wayside so close to home within the EU. Since 2015, only 5 Irish citizens have entered the EU Concord programme and 150 have completed a Blue Book traineeship. The programme for government commits to developing a strategy to increase Ireland's presence in the senior ranks of the EU institutions, and the best way to do this is to encourage and facilitate young Irish people who are applying for internships or entry-level positions. It is vital that a plan is published to support and promote this strategy as soon as possible. Another way of maintaining our influence is to second our civil servants to EU institutions where needed and appropriate. On average, 24 secondments take place annually to the EU. This scheme is vital, building up our expertise in our civil service, and should be expanded. But there is much more that can be done. Bluntly, we struggle with languages. While most of the measures to address this problem is outside of the Minister's remit, I would hope he would put pressure on the Minister for Education to roll out the increase of European languages at primary level. Beyond that, we need to be more creative. On the day of his funeral, perhaps we could also take a page out of Jack Charlton's book. How many Irish citizens are living in Brussels, perhaps grew up there, and are keen to pursue a career in the EU institutions? Ireland is a far more cosmopolitan country now than when we first joined the EEC. Many young Irish graduates are already multilingual, with their parents originally coming from elsewhere. Unfortunately, we also have an issue with our own native language. Dozens of positions for Irish lawyer linguists are not being filled. They are extremely lucrative careers for Gaelgors in the EU, lucrative careers that provide Ireland with great influence. How do we make the most of this, Minister? Beyond the issue of language, the Concours is an unwieldy and difficult examination process that requires dedicated supports from the state for candidates. Beyond the extremely important third-level recruitment campaigns that the Minister will no doubt take part in, and indeed I have taken part in a private capacity, there is much more that needs to be done at the next stage after traineeships. Irish candidates for the Concours need real support in the process. We need to encourage Irish people already living in Brussels to apply for these positions, and perhaps we can engage those Irish people recently retired from the EU institutions to provide a mentoring service. In the context of Brexit, we have seen European solidarity in its finest form. The Brexit solidarity with Ireland from our European partners and the EU's institutions has been a result of years of strong Irish influence on and within the EU. It is therefore vital that we address this glaring problem. We need a revamped and imaginative strategy to address this, because simply, Minister, time will not wait for us.
Yeah, I really want to thank Deputy Richmond for raising this issue. This is a key programme for government commitment, as he knows, and in fact is a key personal commitment of mine, and it's an issue that I identified early on as something that I really want to champion in my role, and I'm glad that Deputy Richmond is singing from that hymn sheet as well, as I know he would be. Our membership of the EU brings with it a range of employment possibilities for Irish citizens in the EU's institutions. We have punched above our weight at EU level for many decades, currently most notably with Emily O'Reilly being the EU Ombudsman, as well as a number of very senior officials in the European Commission. Recently, of course, Minister Donoghue was elected President of the Eurogroup, and indeed, as European Affairs Minister, I was in contact with colleagues in relation to that election as well. Eamon Gilmore has been a European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. My former TD from my county, John Bruton, of course, was Ambassador Representative to the United States. It is also noteworthy that an Irish official, Emer Cook, was recently selected as the incoming Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. She'll be the first woman to lead this regulatory agency since it was formed 25 years ago. Ireland has benefited greatly from having Irish citizens having key roles in the institutions. Two of the most recent Secretaries-General of the European Commission were David O'Sullivan and Catherine Day. And Irish officials working in the institutions know our culture, our system, our priorities, and can provide a crucial understanding of the Irish context during the process of policy formation and implementation at EU level. But as the Deputy has said, it's become very clear over the past few years that we're heading for what's known as a demographic cliff in our representation in the EU. About 29% of Irish officials are over the age of 58, will retire in the next decade, and indeed some of them much earlier than that. This means that the Irish level of representation will fall dramatically in light of projected retirements. At current rates of recruitment, as the Deputy has said, we are far below the replacement rate, posing a serious challenge to all of us. And that's why the programme for government, apart from having very, very strong commitments to the European Union, commits to the development of a new strategy to increase the presence of Irish people in the senior ranks and generally in the EU institutions. We also aim to increase the number of young Irish people applying for internships, and will work with Irish officials and universities on outreach. The strategy, which I've already started to work on, will build and bring together significant work already done by the government and indeed by my predecessor, Deputy McEntee, and I share the compliments that Deputy Richmond has for her. For example, already the Department of Foreign Affairs runs the EU Jobs campaign, promoting careers in the EU. As part of the EU Jobs campaign, my predecessor, the Minister for Justice, as well as the Department officials, attended careers events in universities in 2019 and 2020. I will also participate in those as part of the strategy, as public health guidance permits. The EU Jobs campaign also provides support to Irish candidates and provides direct assistance to Irish citizens who have applied for permanent jobs in the institutions, providing information and advice for the duration of the recruitment competition. And it's only tonight a constituent has contacted me for guidance on those processes and procedures, because they are very, very difficult. My department worked closely with the European Personnel Selection Office, the key body responsible for the recruitment of staff to the institutions, on the EU Career Ambassadors programme. The programme works in collaboration with Irish universities to select around a dozen students each year to promote career opportunities in the EU to their fellow students. We work with a range of other stakeholders, such as the Public Appointment Service and the European Movement in Ireland, in relation to this as well. The recruitment of Irish graduates to the European Commission through the AD5 competitions has been at the rate of 1 to 2 successful candidates a year. While this may seem very impressive, it is actually proportionate to our population. However, this won't be sufficient to match the numbers of those expected to retire in the coming years, and we will be reinforcing our efforts very significantly in the coming weeks and months.
I'd really like to thank the Minister for his reply, and I'm absolutely heartened by the enthusiasm that he and I share for this process. And it is, Ken Corla, a very difficult process that lies ahead of not just the Minister, for everyone, because it behoves everyone in this House and throughout Irish society to see more Irish people working within the EU. And that's why I think one of my biggest criticisms of the European project, Ken Corla, believe it or not, I do criticise occasionally the European project, is its inability to sell itself. The European Commission is brilliant at informing people how they can criticise the Commission and its work, but it doesn't sell the brilliant achievements that it has achieved over the last 60 or so years. But equally, Minister, the Irish Government is not selling Europe. Regardless of what party is in power or what party holds your brief, we're not selling Europe. We're not convincing young Irish graduates that a career in the European institutions should be an attractive one. I will declare an interest. I lived in Europe for 2 years. I didn't pursue that career for personal reasons, but we need to make sure that people realise that they are lucrative, that they are well paid, that they offer huge opportunities in terms of travel, in terms of building experience, and that a lot of people have countered it, saying that, well, maybe it's because of the economic boom in Ireland. But that isn't a fair comparison. I would encourage you, Minister, to please look at some of the more imaginative suggestions that I've made in relation to attracting talent. I very much welcome your commitment to engage with stakeholders. Vital amongst that is European Movement Ireland, but also with the College of Europe. Every year, Irish individuals go to the College of Europe on scholarship. But how many of them, having been trained to work in the European institutions, actually go on to work in the Commission or the Parliament or the Council, or instead work in the private sector? A very fine choice, but it doesn't always benefit Ireland Inc. and our importance of imagination. Again, Ken Corla, I thank you for selecting the topical issue, and I thank the Minister for his engagement.
Thank you, Deputy.
Since taking up office as Minister of State for European Affairs, I've already met my officials on this particular issue, and it is a priority to address it, the decreased Irish people working in the institutions. And with that in mind, I've had extensive meetings in this to continue to develop the strategy that's already underway by my predecessor. And I've arranged a number of meetings with stakeholders for the coming weeks. And I think the Deputy raises a very important point as well, that it's not simply about the application procedure and encouraging people. We have deficiencies in this country in terms of languages, and certainly in the programme for government negotiations, I was very keen to have the Modern Languages Initiative reinstated at primary school, and that's in the programme for government, and certainly I will be working with my colleague, the Minister for Education, in relation to that. We have a national hang-up about languages, and it's about time we got over it. And I don't know what the reason is, but we're bad at learning languages, and that includes our own national language. I was very pleased to speak Irish last week at the General Affairs Council. There wasn't much point in fighting for its status and then not to use the language when we have it. What I said, the programme for government makes a very clear commitment to the development of a new strategy to increase the presence of Irish people in the senior ranks of institutions and in relation to the number of young people. This is a really critical issue for this country. And I would join the Deputy by saying that it is so important for us to constantly talk about the benefits of European Union membership. I've endeavoured to do that even over the last 2 days. The very fact of an agreement at European level this weekend by the Prime Ministers, that give and take, that negotiation, those tough talks, will bring undoubtedly immense benefits to the entire of the European Union. We've seen that over the decades, and we're going to continue to benefit from that. We have peace and stability in Europe, and thank God for it. I'll be more than happy to engage with all colleagues in the House and with Deputy Richmond on this particular issue. This is a challenge that, working together, we can address, and I fully intend to continue to build upon the work of my predecessors on this issue and to bring real improvements to the numbers of Irish people working in the institutions. I can also pay tribute to those who are working in this country in the various offices of the institutions and the agencies, and including in Grange in my own constituency as well.